Hi guys, it's Terracell from Mint Owl Studio, and today I'm going to make a really fun summertime card using some Copic Coloring on Vellum and the really super cute Butterfly Kisses stamp set. So to get started, I'm going to take some Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to create a fun distress inked background using a Mint Owl Studio stencil. So I don't actually prefer this particular cardstock for actual watercoloring for me. I just have other cardstocks that I like better. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this one, and it's entirely personal preference. But what I do love this cardstock for is backgrounds, because it is a really bright, vivid white color, which is kind of rare in watercolor cardstock. They're usually kind of off-white. And so I really like this one for backgrounds because you can get a really nice white contrast with your color, which I think is awesome. So I am using the textured side of this cardstock. It has both a smoother side and a textured side, and I wanted to get the extra texture in my background just to add a little bit of zing there. So I am using some picked raspberry and some spun sugar distress inks, and I am just bringing in that color from the bottom of my panel and working it upwards into white. So I'm just creating kind of an ombre gradient. You can't see that spun sugar tons right now because it's a super light color, but you'll be able to see it better as I work with the card design, and I'm going to trim off a little bit of the top of this panel so some of the stark white goes away and then the pink kind of pops a little bit more. But I just wanted to make sure that that picked raspberry faded out into white for my design here. So now that I've got that color on there, I am going to take the super cute hexagon stencil here from Mint Owl Studio. So this is a really versatile stencil, I think, because it could be like honeycombs, it could be flowers. I mean, there's all kinds of cool things you can do with it, and I think it's super unique. I've not really seen one like this out there, which I think is awesome. So I'm just going to go over the top of that stencil with the exact same two colors of distress ink and put really heavy inking on top, and that's going to create like a really subtle pattern on the background. So rather than coming in with a contrasting color, I just use the exact same and just kind of let it just be a nice and subtle pattern. And then of course I had to spritz it with my distress sprayer because I absolutely love the look of putting water on top of distress ink and then picking it up with a paper towel, and that distress ink color wicks away and you get this really pretty distressed kind of vintagey look. I don't know, I just love it. I think it's super cool. So now I'm going to do a little bit of heat embossing, and before I did this I used my heat gun just to make sure that background was super dry so no embossing powder sticks where I don't want it. And then I used my Embossing Buddy magic powder bag there to go over it one more time just for extra protection from the white embossing powder. And then I'm going to use the Butterfly Kisses stamp set and do a little bit of stamping here on the front. So I'm going to be ultimately using that large butterfly there, so that's why I've kind of got that stamp set sitting over the top of my panel. I want to figure out exactly where I'm going to put this whimsical little flight path track here for my butterfly on the front. So I am using my Ranger Superfine White Detail embossing powder, and I'm just going to first emboss this little whirligig here. I don't know what you call that. There's probably a word for it, but I don't know what it is. You can see as I heat set that, it becomes even more bright white and it pops really well against that pink background. It's part of why I wanted it to be so much darker pink at the bottom, because I knew I was going to be doing some white embossing over the top, and I wanted to make sure that it was really going to stand out. So now I'm going to take this super sweet little sentiment that says just a note, and I'm going to do a little bit of curving of this sentiment. So I want it to follow that path there that the butterfly has. So I'm just going to mount it onto my acrylic block right over the top with the same curve, and that way when I stamp it, you can see it's going to be curved right along with the path there. So I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that right over the top and then heat emboss that as well. So everything's going to be nice and white and just pop against the background. I think that the sentiments in this set are so sweet, and the little tiny font I think is really nice. Like, you could make some really cute little tags or like a set of little note cards with these. I think that the small sentiments are super adorable, and you just don't see that often. So I really like the font too. It's just a nice plain clean font, which is great. So now I have some vellum, And this is just, it's not a special brand of vellum or anything. It's a little bit thicker vellum. I don't know the exact weight of it, but it's not super thin. But I don't think it would hugely matter. Just whatever vellum you have in your stash is going to work great. And I am taking that larger butterfly, and then there's a smaller butterfly that's kind of the exact same butterfly, but just on a different scale. And I'm going to stamp them both in Versamark and then heat emboss them in some white embossing powder on top of that vellum. And then I'm also going to grab a little scrap of black cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss just their little bodies. That's all I need, because I'm going to do a little bit of paper piecing with the bodies of the butterflies. So you can see I didn't stamp the whole butterflies, so that's kind of just to conserve my little scrap of black cardstock. I save like every scrap, especially of basic colors like black and like craft and stuff. Like I save all the scraps because I can use them for little things like this. So now that I've got that all taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and heat set all of that after I put away my giant embossing mess here. It's kind of crazy how many different supplies you need to do heat embossing. It's like I got my embossing buddy, and I got my heat tool, and I got my Versamark, and I got my coffee filter. I mean, it's just, anyway, it's kind of one of the more cumbersome processes, I feel like. So now that that is heat set, I'm going to do something a little different for me, and I am going to do some Copic coloring on top of this vellum. So I'm going to come in with some yellow and color the wings of the butterflies, and I started out trying to see if I wanted to do it on the back, but I didn't think that it showed through as much as I wanted it to for this particular project. But that is a really great way to color vellum, is to just flip it over and color the back, and it's going to show through. So if I was using a little bit more vivid colors, I probably would have just done it that way, but since it didn't come through quite as much as I wanted, I am using my Copics directly on the front. Now, I don't think you want your Copics to come into contact with that heat emboss section a whole ton, so just kind of be careful that you're not coloring over the top very often, and they will color that white heat embossing. So you can see I'm using my gel pen to kind of go back over some of those white lines and just kind of re-whiten them because the Copics kind of covered it up. So anyway, I was going to just do the whole thing on the back, but I just wanted it a little bit brighter. So this is really simple Copic coloring. I'm just using a couple shades of yellow and a couple shades of pink, and my color palette is inspired by the piece of pattern paper that I'm going to use later to round out my layout on my card. But I just think it's super pretty, just really nice and basic on these really pretty butterflies. And again, that white gel pen is really handy if you accidentally get a little color where you don't necessarily want it there. So now that that is all done, I'm going to go ahead and do some fussy cutting. So on the black, I am just cutting out the little bodies of the butterflies, and then I fussy cut out the whole butterfly out of the vellum. I left the vellum in between their little antenna there because it's vellum and you can't really tell. And now I'm going to paper piece the little black bodies right on top of the butterflies so that they have a nice solid body. Now I'm kind of folding the wings over because I ultimately want this to be like a dimensional element on the front of my card. I'm not going to adhere the wings to the card at all. So I want them to kind of look like they're flapping a little bit. So I thought that was super fun. So I put a little wink of Stella over the wings because I firmly believe that all butterfly wings need some sparkle. And now I'm going to take my paper pad. This is the Dear Lizzie Happy Place paper pad. And I am going to use this really fun hibiscus sheet here that is black with these really cute pink hibiscus flowers in there. I'm pretty sure that's how you say that. And they have yellow centers. So that's where my color palette came in. So before I finish the front of the card, I'm going to finish off the inside of the card, and that's where I'm going to put this second little butterfly that I have here. And then I'm going to get some more of those little butterfly path whirligigs that come in the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp them with some Lawn Fawn Wild Rose ink on the inside. I thought that this color just really worked well with the color scheme of the card. And then I'm going to stamp this sweet little just because. So the card says just a note, just because, and I think that's super cute. And it's nice and summery with the butterflies and the pink and the yellow. So I really like that. I thought it was really fun. So I'm just going to use my glue pen to put a little bit of adhesive behind the body on that butterfly on the inside. And that's going to finish the inside of the card. And then I can go ahead and work on my layout on the front. So you can see I didn't adhere those wings at all, so they're going to be kind of dimensional, which I think is really fun and just adds a little extra something to the card. So I'm just going to trim off a little bit of this pattern paper. It's just going to be poking out the bottom, so I don't need tons of it. And then I'm going to grab my ATG gun and put some adhesive on the back so I can adhere that to the front of my A2 size card that I created out of some Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I'm just going to line that up with one side and the bottom, and then I can go ahead and trim off the excess when I flip the card over and make that nice and even on both sides here. And then I will start kind of figuring out how much of the watercolor distress inked background I want to take off. So I'm kind of trying to determine like how much of that pattern paper do I want showing, how much of the design do I want showing, like how much gradient do I need. So once I got it where I liked it, I marked it on the back with my pencil there, and then I just went ahead and took my trimmer and trimmed it off. That Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock comes cut down to A2 size panels, so it's already the size of the front of a card, so I didn't have to worry about that lining up. I just had to trim some more. So I happen to have this really thin yellow washi tape in my stash, and I thought that it coordinated perfectly. So I took a little strip of that and I just put it on the piece of cardstock that I actually just trimmed off the top, just so it had a nice white background and it would show up really well, because I just didn't think that if I put it over the top of that pattern paper that yellow would really shine through. So I stuck it on the back of the white strip, and I'm going to use that as kind of a divider between my pattern paper and my distressed background. So this is some 2mm craft foam, and I'm going to use it to pop up my distress inked panel. So you could absolutely use foam tape, like foam squares, whatever you had on hand that pops things up is going to do the same job. I just prefer craft foam just because I think that it goes through the mail better. I think that ultimately it's easier to just slap one giant piece on the back as opposed to having to tear up all the little strips. So it's like part laziness and part convenience. I don't know. But it's my preferred method for popping things up. So I'm going to use my ATG gun and just put that piece of craft foam right on the back of this distress inked panel that we created with the distress inks and that super cute stencil. And I'm just going around the edge. If you get that ATG adhesive or any kind of tape runner adhesive on the edge, like when you pull it up and it kind of leaves a little straggly tail hanging, you can just kind of rub that back onto the back and it'll go away. So now I'm going to take this piece with the washi tape on it, and I am going to adhere it to the back of this panel that I have just created. And this way, just the yellow is going to poke out, and it's going to be nice and secure, and then the front panel is popped out because this went on top of that craft foam that we had already adhered. So now I'm just going to put a little bit more adhesive on the back so that I can put this whole panel on the front of my note card. So I'm just going to line it up with the fold there, and then go ahead and push it down nice and tight. And that is the majority of the layout of my card. So I just have to get my butterfly on there. Things weren't quite lining up like I wanted them to, so I did a little bit of trimming on the side. I don't think any of my cards end up actually being a full A2 size card. I always end up trimming something off somewhere because I am not very good at lining this stuff up. I am telling you right now. So I'm just going to put adhesive right behind that black body on that butterfly, and then I'm going to stick that down to the front of the card, and you can see how those wings pop up off the card. I think that's super fun, and the vellum just kind of naturally wants to curl like that, so I didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get that look, so I thought that was great too. So I took my white gel pen and I added some dashed lines at the bottom of that distress inked panel just to kind of tie all the white in up to the top and create that nice border there. And then I'm going to use some glossy accents and go over the body of the butterfly on the front of the card. I was going to do the one on the inside, but since I'd have to leave it open, I would have had to wait for this one to dry and then do the other one and leave it open, and I just got lazy and I never went back and did it. But that would be cute too, to add the glossy accents to the butterfly on the inside. So now that that is on there, I'm going to let that dry, and then I added some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh in a bunch of different sizes. And then I'm using my Wink of Stella to go over that washi tape strip and the little hibiscus flowers in the pattern paper, because I just wanted a little bit of extra sparkle on this whole card here. So that is the card for today. You can see how pretty all that sparkle is and how fun that dimension on those butterflies is, and then how it coordinates when you open it on the inside. This is the inside of the card with a close-up for you here, and then I've got a close-up of the butterfly. You can see the pretty Wink of Stella sprinkles and how fun the Copic coloring looks on top of that vellum. I just really like it. I think it's a really fun look. So make sure you head over to the Mint Owl Studio store and pick up this stamp set. It's perfect for summer. And check out the description box below to join Mint Owl Studios on social media. Thanks, guys. Bye.